Good morning, everybody. So as said, we're going to have a wee look at Data Factory today and how it can assist you with various things that you're required to do with your data in the cloud. So this is a brief introduction today to the Data Factory, how it can integrate with your existing big, medium, and also small data that you may be in use. I'll give you a couple of demos at the end to give you an overview of some basic functionality in Azure of Data Factory, such as carrying out some file copy and move operations, and how easy it is to get started using it. A little bit of an agenda there. What is Data Factory? It's data integration options, components of Data Factory, and a good demo of what we can do. So what is Data Factory? So Data Factory is an enterprise-level data integration platform that allows users to move data between your on-premise and cloud systems, as well as schedule data flows between systems. It's a serviceless platform, and you only pay for the activities you actually use. So Data Factory has been around for a few years now. Microsoft introduced it into preview in 2016, and it was initially a serverless Azure-hosted platform to run SQL Server Integration Services, good old SSIS. And today this is still available as Data Factory version 1. However, in 2020, there's a huge change to Data Factory and many more capabilities added, and this is now known as version 2. And it's now much more than the legacy SSIS migration platform. Its main features and how it can fit into big data adoption are it allows real-time integration, parallel processing of files, and it's a good data chunker. So Microsoft give us this very handy overview, which you'll be able to see if you need a copy of the slides after this presentation. It's available for download from Microsoft as well, and it's a little cartoony overview of what it can do. The main points in here to note is it's enterprise ready and it scales from 1 or 2 files upwards to huge data sets using UI mapping in the Data Factory interface, which is all browser driven, or you can do it in PowerShell. It allows code-free transformations to be made on your data. You can still lift and shift legacy SSIS packages to run in a serverless cloud platform to reduce your legacy server estates and move off old legacy platforms. And ADF can actually do this in as few as 3 steps. And a good one, of course, these days is secure data integration. So here's a little graph here of the most popular connectors spanning on-premise, Amazon, Oracle, Google, and Azure. As you can see, these can range from small CSV files or Excel files sitting on SharePoint, file shares, even FTP, and all the way up to big data warehouse platforms such as Teradata's and Oracle's. I haven't actually said NetAzure, but it's in there as well. You've got it's platform agnostic, so it can ingest and then process data to Amazon, Google, even the IBM cloud. Doesn't really matter where it is. It supports like NoSQL platforms such as Cosmos and MongoDB as well. So there's a huge amount of connectors, over 90 now. It's probably 100 now. Of where it can ingest and store data to. It just sits in the data there. So Data Factory supports multi-cloud and on-premise source and destinations. As I said, use more than 90 different connectors. Data can be copied and modified by Data Factory and doesn't limit you to using Azure and the destination, or we'll call it from now on the sync location for your data. You can create multiple data pipelines to the same sync location, so quite quickly your different data sets across many types of file types and databases can be ingested into one location with a uniform view structure and schema. For example, a Data Factory, you can use a pipeline copy to move data from both an on-prem cloud data store to a new data store in the cloud for analysis with, say, Power BI. And we're going to reference Power BI quite a lot because we are obviously a Microsoft partner, and it's a great reporting platform for actually orchestrating and producing reports on data sets. For example, say we're running a shipping company that's grown by expansion and acquisition. Because of this, you could have a shipping documentation manifest which don't share the same format, making it very hard to run reports and activity due to the different data types and formats in use across the business. What Data Factory can allow you to do is copy and modify the data into a unified structure and then connect the output data into Power BI. Now here's an example of a very basic way that Data Factory can ingest data for a customer. So on the left here, we've got semi-structured data, so that's Excel files or even TXT files, CSV files in file shares, Power output data, and SharePoint, data held in SharePoint. And what happens there is Data Factory can ingest that data, and as part of that ingestion, it can actually unify the files that they share the same sort of schema. And in this case, we're dumping into an Azure SQL database because they can be quite low end and very cost effective. And because it's cloud, it's obviously a very fast copy operation. We can also then pull in, say, big unstructured data from a data lake store or other databases, and then use Power BI to give a unified report from all these different data sources. So Data Factory consists of the following components. We're going to go into pipelines quite a lot, and all these other parts integrate into the pipelines themselves. I mean, a pipeline is a logical group of activities that together perform a task, and we'll go into pipelines in more detail in the next slides. Activities in the pipeline define actions to perform your data, such as copy and move. Link services are much like connection strings, which define the connection information needed for the service to connect external resources, such as a connection string to a database or username and password to a file share. And obviously these are all secured within Data Factory. And the dataset represents the structure of the data within the linked data stores. So there's not a lot of bits there that actually make up what a Data Factory does, and this will make sense when we go through the demo. The integration runtime provides a bridge between activity and the linked services, and it's going to be the following types. It could be purely Azure, it could be self-hosted, or it could be, as previously said, there's still SSIS components within Data Factory. And there will probably always be until the next great thing comes along in SQL. So pipelines are code-free that allow varied move, modify, and copy activities to be made on data and made on data very quickly. Pipeline can contain a group of activities that can be a single operation or linked together. For example, we could ingest data from an Azure Blob storage account, then run a Hive query on it in the HD Insight cluster to partition the data, or we can just use it to copy selected data to another file or data store. Now, pipelines can be triggered on schedule by an external trigger from another application or just even manually. And we're going to demonstrate how easy a pipeline can be created in a wizard, linked services, and then we'll add it to an existing pipeline in the demo. Along with move and copy operations, literal transform operations can relate to filter and change data. This is a slightly out of scope for today's presentation, but if we can always revisit this at a later date. The interesting thing is, if you've got any exposure to the Apache Big Data Suite, which is mainly Hadoop and Spark, there's a managed instance of Apache Spark within this that generates the code and looks after it within Data Factory. So it's all built on the Hadoop and Spark platform, as is things Azure resources like HD Insight and Databricks. So as part of the demo I'm going to do now, we're going to use a pipeline wizard to quickly create a copy pipeline in Azure Data Factory, and then we're going to add that data to an existing pipeline that will copy data into an Azure SQL database. It's all fairly low end, but hopefully the demonstration will make you see what we can actually do with this. Okay, so if you just bear with me 1 second. Right, so I have here in Excel a list of very simple Excel spreadsheets with 3 columns: first name, surname, and location. This one's about 2,000 lines long, so it's quite small, but it's much larger than my existing sample data. To keep everything cloud-based, I've got an Azure storage container. It's just a blob, which I'm going to copy this file into. That'll go up quite quickly. I'll just hit refresh on that. And obviously this could be an on-premise data store, it could be anything. There it is, yeah. So it's coming out of CSV, that's fine. And if I now just open up here. So this is the Data Factory homepage within Azure. It's all browser driven, although you can use PowerShell to do it. And in here we've got ingest, orchestrate, transform, and obviously, as previously mentioned, SSIS. I haven't got an old SQL server handy, but we could always revisit this at a later date. And down the side here, we've got the homepage, authoring, which allows us to modify existing pipelines or create them from scratch, monitor pipelines, because obviously it can be triggered on a schedule. So the shipping information collation, as we mentioned before, we could have one pipeline that ran at midnight or even every hour. We should pull all these different files together into one pipeline and push it into an SQL database for then surfacing out in Power BI. So you can run it once a day, once an hour, once a minute, once a year. It doesn't really matter. And obviously you've got the management thing there as well. And obviously, Data Factory, for any developers on the call, you can actually connect it to GitHub or DevOps if you're still on that area. So what we're going to do here is I've uploaded that file. We're just going to use it just to copy of it. Let's go a bit into Azure using Data Factory. So I'm just going to use built-in copy task. And this is just a wizard. Choose my source type. Now this is where as before, there's all these connectors, very, very different stuff, like even Access if you're playing with really old school databases, all the way up to Oracle. Some pretty chunky stuff's in there as well. There's Spark and Teradata, file shares, there's Hadoop, the Hadoop file system, Mongo databases, you name it. There's a lot of stuff in there. I really would recommend SAP at the bottom. What I'm doing is I'm doing the most basic. I'm just going to pull a file off a blob storage to make it as easy as possible. Now, this is obviously the data set I've already got connection to the data store I've already got defined, just because I've previously used this. And all I'm going to say here is, so I use the wizard, I'm just going to browse to the file I want to use. I've got it in here. And it's that new long list of names. Click OK on there. So there it is. Say one connection. And obviously, if you have multiple files, you can do the directory rather than a single file, and obviously you can filter by the time it was last modified as well if you just want stuff from like last hour, day, month. File format here, so it's just going to do a quick look, and there's a nice bit here. It can detect the file format very intelligently for you, and even gives an option to preview the data, so let's pull up the first bit, just like an SQL, show the first so many rows. As far as I remember, it's a comma separated, and we can use the first row as a header, just so that we have that. No compression on that, so let's go next on that. Now the target, I'm just going to cheat here and just write it back to itself, because we'll write to SQL afterwards. So I'm just going to create a new file in the same blob container. So the folder path, I'm just going to use as the same one. So there's some files. I'm going to call it long list. Oops, my spelling. We'll need to play with copy behavior. Let's go again, one connection. This is a very basic text file, but this could be going to a database. It could be going from database to file, database to a different kind of database. Data Factory is just the bit in the middle that processes it. Add edit to file. No compression. I'm not going to play with any of these other settings at all. It's just, as I say, really basic CSV style document. And we're going to go up to this. I'm going to call this EMP3, and it's going to make sense in a minute. And it says export or copy from txt to. I'm going to bother with logging. There's the advanced stuff we can do here. If we're using data integration, obviously that's got slightly bigger charge, and these runs only cost a few pence each. We'll go into that at the end. And we've got a little bit of an overview there. We can make any changes. Obviously, if this is a very simple copy to copy, but obviously if you're doing a big one, you might want to just go in and check stuff. Hit next on that. It's just going to validate it. And it's run. So if I hit finish now, If I just quickly switch back to my Azure Blob storage here, and then we have an EMP record. Check. Actually copy it. I think that worked. Let's just check. Because it's always the danger when you do a demo, something's going to go wrong. Yeah, EMP3, there we go. So that's the so that's the copy data. That's fine. That's fine. Right, okay. So double check. Sync is, let's call the data set there. I'm just going to double check this. It's fine. Right. So I've got an existing pipeline, these two copy data ones, which use very similar data. They have an employee file, and I've just put the prefix. These are much smaller data sets. So this one's got 4 lines, first name, last name. This one's got one called location, and this is where it gets quite interesting. And what this does is it writes it to an SQL database, and within that we map first name to first name, last name to last name, location to location, which is fine. We've got another data set here which runs the chain together. These could run in parallel and just change together so that we have one and then the other. The source is another database little text file. It says first names. There's only 3 columns there in the location field. Again, the mapping is the same on both, but that's fine. What I can do here is if I copy, let's copy the second one. Again, as you see here, it's all, I can chain these together just to make it logical. But so this is where you can upload many files to a database in one shot, and these do not need to be linked together like this. I'm just going to choose the source. So that new destination data set we just created in our EMP run there, and I've just previewed the data on it. There's the data set that was created. First name, surname, location. So obviously location is a different field. I say this is very, very basic stuff, but it'll give you an idea of what you can do. So we just added this one in, changed the data set. It's got the same destination, which is the SQL data, and it's the SQL is not actually existing at the moment because I'm allowing it to build it here. There's going to be a DBO called new employee created in this Azure SQL database, but we'll go into that in a minute. And what we need to do in changing this one is, if I do import schemas, because this one's changed, see it's giving me a warning here that they're not the same. So this one's surname rather than last name, and this one's lock rather than location. But I'm just saying that first name matches the first name, surname matches surname, now lock matches location, yeah? Now, because I've changed this now, I just need to publish these changes. But what we'll do is we'll just publish all. So I've modified my 2 files to SQL. I've gone in and had a look at my employee 3 pipeline. Just hit publish on that. It's going to deploy it. It is running a little bit slow today. I've been getting these running at about 8 seconds, but it took about a minute for one of them this morning because I did a quick test run through. And now it's validated, we can actually run it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do a manual trigger. It's that just pressing the big green button, yeah. So it's now running using the last published configuration, which we've just done. It's running now. If I click on View Pipeline on here, it's going to chunk through. Now, obviously, this is running in a browser. It doesn't always refresh. So if I just take a little refresh here, so that's the first bit, copy data 1. So that's this one here, which is copying data from one text file into SQL. And then obviously it's going to now, that's the second one done. That's copied a different file into SQL. And then the last one here, the copy data 2, copy 1, which has got the new employee one. It's queued, it's a little bit bigger, but it shouldn't take much longer, and that's now succeeded. So we've added an additional copy operation into the existing pipeline. If I now go into my SQL database and just refresh my tables, there's my new employee database there. This is slightly slow because it's quite a low-end database. There's my original input files, 2 of them, and there's that bigger one with all those other many names. So there should be about 2,400 rows now. Yeah, just pulled the first 1,000. So that's obviously quite easily copied some text information into a database, but using a drag and drop interface. So that's pretty much the how to create ingesting data and push it into something else. There's additional things you can do within Data Factory, which will be a bit too much to probably cover today, and there's a bit to get wrong with it as well, like everything. But obviously we can do some data flows where we can obviously change some settings, use various transform activities within them. But yeah, obviously you can just link them all together and take an output file from here and push it to there, and it's very code free, and you're just changing the variables and the settings for it where you want to put it out to. So delete that one there. So it's a very powerful interface, and obviously you can do stuff like power queries on them as well. And just so you know what's actually linked to the Data Factory, these are all the connection strings as such I've already pulled in. These take seconds to do if you've got the rights in Azure for them. So there's my database server. There's my blob storage, and I added the table storage yesterday. I was kind of trying to be a bit too clever in using table storage to pull things, which didn't get quite right at the time I had. And that's basically it. We're pulling from the blob storage into the database, and Data Factory sits in the middle. But as previously said, anything could be basically sitting in the middle there. Okay. So it's great. I think that is basically me there. Let's go to my last, my last slide.
Cool.
Lost slides. Yeah, sorry, I've lost my slides.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Stuart. Before we look at any questions that have come in, just like to thank everyone for attending our event this morning. We're really keen to carry on the conversation around Azure or Microsoft 365 or any of your technical challenges on the Microsoft front. Appreciate we have a mix today of existing CompanyNet customers and people that perhaps we haven't worked with before. Either way, you'll be all on different points in your technology journey. So if you have any challenges like that, do please drop us a line. So we had a couple of questions come in. Samantha asks, how long does Data Factory take to deploy and set up?
That's quite a good question. It really deploys in minutes. I mean, I created a new Data Factory for the purpose of this demonstration yesterday morning, and it took about 5 minutes to deploy. Because it's basically a serverless platform, you're just getting your own instance created on the fabric that it runs on. So it's very quick. You have to obviously import your linked services, but generally, if you've got admin permissions within Azure, those services will link automatically. So if you've got a blob store or a database, you're just connecting it with the credentials you've got access to, or things like Key Vault credentials and things like that. But yeah, it's very easy to deploy.
Cool. And Jamie asks, this all looks great, but how much does it actually cost to run in the real world?
Okay, so the pipeline runs there. So a pipeline can cost around 5 to 6 pence to run, but it doesn't just need to be one copy operation. As you see there, I've chained 3 together. Copy and move are very cheap. So you can have one with maybe, let's say, 30 or 40 files just getting copied into a database. The actual that operation will cost under 10 pence. If they just bear with us a second, I've actually got my running costs for the last week for a Data Factory here. So I've been doing a lot of testing, obviously, to make sure that nothing went wrong on my demo here. It's cost me 32 pence for a lot of runs in Data Factory there since this month, yeah. And my forecast, if I kept doing it at this rate, it would cost me £1.27 for the month. Where Data Factory can incur costs is if you're doing some very complex transformation activities, with transformation sort of abilities of it, where you're filtering and modifying data, that you build for an hour's worth of compute. So these are for the big jobs where you're mangling and shaping the data within the managed Spark instance within Data Factory, and that can maybe cost a pound or so, but you're buying a quite huge block of compute. So these are for like more what you might be doing on premise with SSIS or even Spark on-prem. You're passing it to Data Factory, and these aren't things you'd be possibly running every single hour, every single day. These might be like monthly consolidation, pipelines and things like that. But yeah, I mean, for the stuff that I've been demoing today, it's pennies. And if you have access to an NPN account or you've got some Azure credit, it's definitely worth having a wee play about, because you can start chaining stuff together very, very easily.